Lisa Morgan stood in the grand hall of her family's estate, staring at the formal contract on the table before her. The document outlined the terms of her marriage to a human officer named Jake Coleman. She did not want to sign it. She did not want this marriage at all. This alliance requires sacrifice, daughter. Her father's voice echoed through the chamber. High Commander Morgan was a decorated warrior. His blue skin marked with the scars of 100 battles. The Zenthari valued strength above all else, and her father embodied that principle. The humans are new to the Galactic Coalition. We must show them respect, even if they are weak. Lisa clenched her jaw. Weak. That was the word everyone used for humans. They were small compared to Zenthari warriors. Their homeworld was dangerous. True. But they had no real military tradition. They were diplomats, administrators, paper pushers, who hid behind words instead of fighting with honor. And now she had to marry one. I understand my duty, father. Lisa picked up the signing instrument. Her hand did not shake. A warrior did not show weakness. Even when her heart protested, she marked her name on the contract with quick, angry strokes. The ceremony took place 3 days later. Lisa wore her military dress uniform. The deep purple fabric decorated with the symbols of her rank and family. She stood rigid as stone while the coalition officiator read the traditional words. Across from her stood Lieutenant Jake Coleman. He was unremarkable. Brown hair, average height for a human, which made him nearly a head shorter than Lisa. His eyes were a plain brown color, and his face held no particular distinction. He wore a human naval uniform that looked too formal and uncomfortable. A single decoration hung on his chest, some human military award she did not recognize. Jake met her gaze steadily during the ceremony. His expression was calm, almost blank. He did not smile or frown. When the time came for him to speak his vows, his voice was quiet but clear. He agreed to the marriage without hesitation, as if this were just another duty assignment. Lisa spoke her own vows mechanically. The words felt hollow in her mouth. When the ceremony concluded, they signed the final documents. Jake's signature was neat and precise. He did not touch her beyond the required formal handclasp that sealed their union. The reception was worse. Lisa's fellow officers offered careful congratulations, while their eyes held pity or amusement. Captain Drake, her second in command, leaned close during the meal. At least he seems well trained, Drake whispered. Like a proper pet. Lisa said nothing, but shame burned in her chest. Not shame for Jake, but shame that this was her fate. She had graduated top of her class at the War Academy. She had led successful campaigns against pirates and smugglers. She commanded respect through her skill and courage, and now she was bound to a human liaison officer who probably spent his days filing reports and making polite conversation. Jake sat beside her at the table, eating quietly. He did not try to make conversation. He did not seem bothered by the stares and whispered comments from the Zenthari guests. When someone asked him about his duties, he answered politely and briefly. He was professional to the point of being invisible. The celebration ended late. Lisa and Jake were given quarters in the family estate for the night before they would depart for their new posting. The rooms were well appointed but felt like a cage to Lisa. Jake set his small bag of belongings near the door. I can sleep in the other room if you prefer, he said. His tone was neutral. Matter of fact, that would be appropriate, Lisa replied stiffly. He nodded once and moved to the adjoining chamber without another word. Lisa stood alone in the main room, feeling the weight of her new reality settle over her shoulders. The next morning, new orders arrived. Lisa's unit was being deployed to Outpost 7, a border station near Krath territory. As her legal spouse, Jake would accompany her as an observer and liaison officer. Lisa wanted to scream. Bad enough to have a human husband. Now she had to bring him to a military posting where her subordinates would see him every day. It was humiliating. I'm ready to depart whenever you give the word, Jake said, when she informed him of the orders. He had already packed his belongings into a single efficient travel case. They boarded the transport ship that afternoon. The vessel was a military frigate carrying supplies and personnel to various outposts. Lisa knew the captain and several of the crew. They greeted her warmly, then their eyes slid to Jake with barely concealed curiosity. Jake found a seat in the passenger compartment and pulled out a data pad. He began reading reports, his expression focused and calm. He did not try to sit next to Lisa. He did not try to engage her in conversation. He simply existed in his own quiet space, undemanding and unremarkable. Lisa watched him from across the compartment. What was he thinking? Did he resent this arrangement as much as she did? Or was he simply going through the motions of duty like a good soldier? She noticed small things during the journey. Jake maintained a precise routine. He ate at regular intervals, always healthy food. Nothing excessive. He exercised in the ship's small gym every morning, a routine that seemed more intense than she expected for a desk officer. He was polite to everyone, but formed no real connections with the crew. Once, Lisa saw him late at night in the observation deck. He stood alone, staring out at the stars streaming past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. His face held an expression she could not read. Sadness, perhaps, or maybe just tiredness. When he noticed her presence, the expression vanished instantly, replaced by his usual neutral calm. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Combat officers learn to sleep when they can, Lisa replied. What's your excuse? Old habit. Jake turned back to the viewport. I've never been good at sleeping on ships. Lisa wanted to ask why. She wanted to ask many things. Why had he agreed to this marriage? What did he really think of being bound to a Zenthari warrior who clearly did not want him? What was behind that carefully blank expression he wore like armor? But she asked none of these questions. Instead, she left the observation deck and returned to her quarters alone. The transport reached Outpost 7 after 3 days of travel. The station hung in the darkness of space, a massive structure of metal and composite materials. It monitored the border between Coalition space and the territory of the Krath Empire. The Krath were aggressive expansionists who had been growing bolder in recent months. Lisa gathered her gear and prepared to disembark. This was a real military posting. A place where warriors proved their worth. She would throw herself into her duties and try to forget about the quiet human who was now bound to her by law and politics. Jake followed her down the boarding ramp with his single bag. He looked around the docking bay with those unreadable brown eyes, taking in every detail. Then he turned to her. Where do you need me to report? He asked. Communications Center, Lisa said. You'll be handling diplomatic channels and coordination between species. Understood. Jake nodded once. He did not ask where their shared quarters were. He did not ask anything personal. He simply headed toward the station directory to find his duty station. Lisa watched him go. This unremarkable human, who was now her husband. She felt nothing but resentment and the cold weight of duty. The thought that this man would change everything, that he would become a legend whispered across 1,000 worlds, never crossed her mind. She had no idea who Jake Coleman really was. Outpost 7 was not a glamorous assignment. The station orbited a barren moon in a system that held no strategic value beyond its position near the Krath border. Most of the personnel stationed there were either young officers gaining experience or older ones nearing retirement. Lisa fell into neither category, which made the posting feel even more like punishment. The station commander was General Vance, a grizzled Zenthari veteran with silver streaks in his blue skin. He greeted Lisa in his office on her first day. Captain Morgan, your reputation precedes you. Vance's voice carried the rasp of someone who had shouted too many battle commands. I'm glad to have a warrior of your caliber here. The border has been getting more active lately. I'm honored to serve, General. Lisa stood at attention. Vance's eyes shifted to the personnel file on his desk. I see you brought your husband with you. The human liaison officer. Yes, sir, Lieutenant Coleman. Interesting. Vance tapped the file. Well, we can always use another set of hands in communications. Dismissed. Captain. Your first patrol briefing is at 0600 tomorrow. Lisa settled into her duties quickly. She led training exercises, ran patrol routes, and worked to keep her team sharp. The work was routine but necessary. The other Zenthari officers treated her with respect, though she sometimes caught them glancing at her with curiosity. Everyone knew about her marriage. Jake worked in the communications center on a different deck. Lisa rarely saw him during duty hours. They shared quarters. A simple two-room unit that felt cramped and awkward. Jake took the smaller bedroom without being asked. They ate meals at different times. They spoke only when necessary, brief exchanges about schedules or station announcements. But Lisa noticed things. Jake kept unusual hours. She would wake at night and see light under his door, hear the quiet sound of him moving around. He exercised every morning at 0400, before most of the station was awake. Once, Lisa passed the gym during his routine and stopped to watch through the window. The exercises were intense. Jake moved through combat drills with focused precision. His movements were economical and practiced. He worked with weights that seemed heavy for his size, and his endurance impressed her. This was not the routine of a desk officer staying minimally fit. This was the routine of someone who trained for war. Lisa also noticed scars, small glimpses when he moved through their shared quarters in off-duty clothes, a long mark across his shoulder blade, something that looked like a burn on his ribs, more than a liaison officer should have. She said nothing. It was not her business. They were married in law only, not in any real sense. The weeks passed. The border grew more active. Krath ships began appearing on long-range sensors with increasing frequency. They never crossed into coalition space, but they probed the borders, testing response times and patrol patterns. General Vance increased the alert level. Training exercises became more frequent and more realistic. Lisa threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction. During briefings, Lisa began to notice something else about Jake. He attended as the communications liaison, sitting quietly in the back of the room, but sometimes he would make observations that were unexpectedly sharp. The Krath probe patterns suggest they're mapping our sensor coverage, Jake said during one briefing. His voice was calm and analytical. They're looking for blind spots in our detection grid. The intelligence officer, a Zenthari named Commander Hayes, frowned. What makes you think that, Lieutenant? The timing and positioning of their incursions. Jake pulled up a tactical display. Each probe enters at a slightly different vector and depth. They're building a three-dimensional model of our effective range. If you overlay their flight paths over the past 2 weeks, you can see the pattern. The room went quiet. Hayes studied the display, then nodded slowly. You're right. They're preparing for something. General Vance looked at Jake with new interest. Good catch, Lieutenant. Communications, work with intelligence to fill in those gaps. Lisa stared at her husband. Where had that come from? That was not the observation of a simple liaison officer. That was tactical analysis from someone who understood military operations. The incident repeated itself. During a training scenario, equipment in one of the defensive batteries malfunctioned. Smoke began pouring from a control panel. The drill turned into a real emergency, as fire suppression systems failed to activate. Lisa was coordinating the evacuation when she saw Jake moving through the corridor. He was not running in panic like some of the junior personnel. He moved with purpose. A fire extinguisher in his hands, he went straight to the burning panel and put out the fire with practiced efficiency. Then began directing people away from the damage section with clear, authoritative commands. When the emergency was over, Lisa found him in the corridor, checking personnel for injuries. Where did you learn that? She asked. Jake looked up at her. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes. Something hard and old. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual calm. All humans receive basic emergency training, he said. Shipboard fires are dangerous. We drill for them constantly. It was a reasonable answer. But something about his tone felt practiced, like he had given that explanation many times before. That night, Lisa accessed the personnel database. She pulled up Jake's service record. Curious about his background, the file was surprisingly thin. It listed his current posting, his academy graduation, and a few liaison assignments. But large sections were marked with security classifications above her clearance level. Why would a liaison officer's file be classified? Lisa tried to push the question from her mind. She had her own duties to focus on. The Krath were becoming more aggressive, and everyone on the station could feel the tension building. 3 months into their posting, the situation escalated. A coalition scout ship vanished near the border. Search and rescue found only debris. Analysis suggested Krath weapons. When the coalition demanded an explanation, the Krath Empire denied responsibility. Then another ship disappeared, and another. General Vance called an emergency briefing. The command staff gathered in the war room, faces grim. Intelligence reports indicate the Krath are massing forces along the entire border sector, Vance said. Fleet Command estimates they have at least 200 warships in position. Our nearest reinforcements are 3 weeks away. Are they preparing to invade? Lisa asked. We don't know, but Outpost 7 and the other border stations are directly in their path. We've been ordered to maintain our position and delay any Krath advance as long as possible. The room absorbed this in silence. Everyone knew what that meant. They were a speed bump, buying time for the coalition to mobilize at the cost of their own lives. Jake sat in his usual spot at the back of the room. His expression was unreadable, but Lisa saw his hands resting flat on the table. They were completely steady. No nervousness, no fear, just calm acceptance. The briefing continued. Vance outlined defensive preparations, evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel, and contingency plans. When he finished, he looked around the room. Any questions, General? Jake's quiet voice cut through the tension. Request permission to access tactical systems and review defensive layouts. Every head in the room turned to look at him. Vance studied Jake for a long moment. You're a communications officer, Lieutenant Coleman. Yes, sir. But I have experience with defensive operations. I might be able to help optimize our positions. What kind of experience? Jake held the general's gaze. Classified, sir. But if you check my full service record, you'll see I'm qualified. The room went silent. Lisa stared at her husband. What was he talking about? Vance's expression changed. He picked up his datapad and typed something. His eyes widened slightly as he read. Then he looked at Jake with new understanding. Permission granted, Lieutenant. Report to tactical planning at 0800 tomorrow. Thank you, sir. The briefing ended. Personnel filed out, talking in low voices about the coming crisis. Lisa waited until the room cleared, then approached Vance. General, what's in his file? Vance looked at her thoughtfully. You're his wife. You should ask him yourself, Captain. I'm asking you, sir. The general sighed. Your husband is not what he appears to be, Captain Morgan. That's all I can say. But I suggest you pay closer attention to him in the coming days. You might be surprised. That night, Lisa confronted Jake in their quarters. What are you? She demanded. Jake looked up from the datapad he was studying. Tactical diagrams covered the screen. I'm your husband. And a coalition officer. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. Jake set down the pad. The Krath are coming, Lisa. When they do, I'm going to do everything I can to keep this station and everyone on it alive. That's all that matters. It was the first time he had used her first name. The sound of it in his quiet voice surprised her. I don't understand you, Lisa said. I know. Jake's expression softened slightly. But you will. Soon enough. The next day, long-range sensors detected a massive Krath fleet entering the border zone. Over 300 ships. More than initial estimates. They were heading straight for Coalition space, and Outpost 7 stood directly in their path. The alarms began to sound. The Krath fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of insects. 300 warships filled the sensor screens, their weapons already charging. Outpost 7's shields snapped to full power as the first enemy salvo screamed across the void. Lisa ran to her battle station, pulling on her combat armor as she moved. Around her, the station erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors rushed to defensive positions, weapons systems came online, and damage control teams stood ready. All batteries, focus fire on the lead cruisers. General Vance's voice boomed through the command channel. Make them pay for every meter they advance. Lisa reached the portside defensive battery and took command. Her crew was already in position. Zenthari warriors, she had trained herself. The first Krath ship entered range, and Lisa gave the order to fire. Energy beams lanced out from the station. The Krath cruiser's shields flared bright, absorbing the impact. Return fire hammered into Outpost 7's shields. The station shuddered under the assault. Shields holding at 70%, someone reported. Keep firing, Lisa ordered. Target their shield generators. The battle fell into a brutal rhythm. Fire and counterfire, attack and defense. The Krath pressed forward in waves, accepting losses to wear down the station's defenses. More ships kept coming, an endless tide of enemies. 2 hours into the battle, the shields dropped to 40%. Krath boarding pods began launching from their ships, magnetic grapples pulling them toward the station's hull. Boarding parties incoming, Vance announced. All security teams to breach points. Repel boarders. Lisa's communicator buzzed. Captain Morgan, this is Coleman. I'm reading hull breaches in sections 12 through 17. Krath shock troops are inside. Jake's voice was different now. Harder, more focused. The quiet liaison officer was gone. Acknowledged, Lisa replied. I'm moving to intercept. She left her second-in-command in charge of the battery and grabbed her rifle. A squad of 6 warriors fell in behind her as she ran through the corridors toward the nearest breach point. They found the Krath in Section 14. The enemy shock troops were massive creatures, 8 feet tall with 4 arms and thick armor plating. They carried heavy weapons and advanced in a tight formation, killing anything in their path. Defensive positions, Lisa ordered. Her squad spread out, using corridor corners for cover. Fire on my mark. The Krath rounded the corner and Lisa opened fire. Energy bolts caught the lead alien in the chest, staggering it. Her squad added their firepower, focusing on one target at a time. The first Krath went down, but 3 more pushed forward, returning fire with devastating accuracy. One of Lisa's warriors fell, a smoking hole in his chest. Another took a hit to the leg and collapsed. They were losing ground, and more Krath were coming. Then Jake appeared from a side passage. He moved like nothing Lisa had ever seen. No wasted motion, no hesitation. He carried a rifle in one hand and a compact weapon she did not recognize in the other. He fired both simultaneously, each shot finding a target with impossible precision. A Krath turned to engage him, and Jake dodged under its weapon, moving inside its guard. He placed his compact weapon against a weak point in its armor and fired. The alien dropped. Fall back to Junction 7, Jake commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. Set up a crossfire pattern. Morgan, take the left flank. I'll handle the right. Lisa found herself obeying without thinking. She and her remaining warriors repositioned while Jake covered their retreat. He moved backward, smoothly, never exposing himself unnecessarily, his weapons firing in controlled bursts. They reached the junction, and Jake was right. The corridor layout created a perfect kill zone. When the Krath advanced, they walked into overlapping fields of fire from 3 directions. The enemy fell quickly. Jake coordinated the defense with calm efficiency, calling out targets and directing fire. He fought like a machine, but a machine that understood tactics and terrain on an instinctive level. When the last Krath dropped, Lisa's squad stared at Jake in shock. He checked his weapons, reloading with practice speed, then activated his communicator. Coleman to all human personnel. Execute Defensive Protocol Gamma. I'm taking tactical command of interior defense. Acknowledged, sir. Multiple voices responded instantly. Sir. The humans on the station called him Sir. What's happening? Lisa demanded. Jake looked at her. His eyes were different now. Cold and focused, the eyes of someone who had seen war and mastered it. "I'm doing my job, Captain. We need to coordinate if we're going to survive this." More breach alerts sounded. The Krath were hitting the station in a dozen places at once. Jake pulled up a tactical display on his wrist computer. "The Krath are using standard boarding tactics," he said, analyzing the data. "They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers and establish strong points. We need to prevent them from consolidating, hit them hard at each breach, keep them fragmented." "How do you know their tactics?" Lisa asked. "Because they're effective, and because I've fought similar operations before." Jake's fingers moved across the display. "We're going to turn this station into a maze they can't navigate. Every corridor becomes a trap. Every junction becomes a killing ground." Over the next hour, Jake transformed the defense of Outpost 7. He coordinated human and Xanthari forces with equal skill, positioning them to maximize their strengths. The humans, she noticed, followed his orders with the discipline of soldiers who had trained together. Lisa fought alongside him, moving from one battle to the next. She watched him adapt to every situation. When ammunition ran low, he switched to captured Krath weapons without missing a beat. When a group of civilians were trapped, he organized a rescue operation with surgical precision. When the Krath tried a feint, he saw through it instantly and repositioned forces to counter their real attack. "Who are you?" Lisa asked during a brief lull in the fighting. Jake reloaded his rifle without looking at her. "I'm the man you married, Lisa. I'm just also a soldier. A very experienced soldier. You're more than that." He met her eyes. "Yes, but we can talk about it later. Right now, we need to hold this station." General Vance's voice cut across all channels. "All personnel. The Krath are launching their main assault. Every ship they have is moving to attack positions. This is it." The station shook as hundreds of enemy weapons fired simultaneously. Shields collapsed under the sustained barrage. Alarms wailed as hull breaches multiplied. The Krath were coming with everything they had. Jake studied his tactical display, his expression grim. "They're going to try to overwhelm the central hub. If they take it, they control life support and power distribution. We lose the station. Can we stop them?" Lisa asked. "We can try." Jake started moving toward the central hub at a run. "Gather every available warrior. We're going to hold that hub no matter what it takes." Lisa grabbed her communicator. "All units, converge on central hub. Prepare for close combat." They reached the hub just as the first wave of Krath broke through. The central chamber was massive. A 3-story space filled with critical systems and control terminals. The Krath poured in from multiple entrances, their heavy weapons tearing through equipment and personnel. Jake took position at the main entrance, a handful of human soldiers at his side. Lisa and her Xanthari warriors held the secondary approaches. The Krath came in endless waves. Jake fought like nothing Lisa had ever witnessed. He moved through the battle with brutal efficiency, reading enemy movements before they happened, turning their own tactics against them. He used the environment as a weapon, collapsing support structures to block approaches, redirecting power conduits to create improvised barriers. The battle raged for hours. Lisa lost track of time, lost in the rhythm of combat. Her armor was scorched and dented. Her muscles screamed with exhaustion. But she kept fighting. Because Jake kept fighting, and somehow his presence made impossible odds seem bearable. At one point, she found herself fighting back-to-back with him, surrounded by Krath on all sides. "I underestimated you," she said between shots. "Most people do," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Duck." Lisa dropped instinctively. Jake's rifle fired over her head, taking down a Krath that had been about to attack from behind. "Thanks," she gasped. "We're partners now. Partners watch each other's backs." Something shifted in Lisa's heart at those words. This man, this quiet human she had resented, was fighting with everything he had to protect her and everyone on the station. He was a warrior in the truest sense, and she had been too blind to see it. The Krath commander, watching from his flagship, grew frustrated. His forces should have taken the station hours ago. Instead, They were being ground down in brutal corridor fighting, bled dry by defenders who refused to break. "Prepare the planet killer," the Krath commander ordered. "We will destroy this station and everything in the system. Let it be a message to the Coalition." On Outpost 7, sensors detected the massive weapon charging. General Vance's voice was grim. "All personnel, the Krath are preparing to fire a planet-killer weapon. Estimated time to firing, 30 minutes. Fleet reinforcements are still 2 hours away." Jake stared at the tactical display, his jaw tightened. "There's one option," he said quietly. "A boarding party. Hit the flagship. Disable the weapon before they can fire." "That's suicide," Lisa said. "The flagship will be heavily defended." "Yes, but it's the only way to save this station and everyone on it." Jake looked at her. "I'm going. I need volunteers." "I'm going with you," Lisa said immediately. "Lisa, you don't have to." "I'm going," she repeated firmly. "You said we're partners." "Partners don't let each other face death alone." Jake's expression softened for just a moment. Then he nodded. Within minutes, they assembled a strike team. 10 humans, including Jake. 8 Zenthari warriors, including Lisa. 18 soldiers against an enemy flagship. They boarded a small assault shuttle and launched into the chaos of battle. Krath fire filled the space around them, but the pilot was skilled. They dodged and weaved through the enemy fleet, heading straight for the massive flagship at the center. Jake checked his weapons one final time. "When we breach, move fast and hit hard. No mercy, no hesitation. We get to that weapon and shut it down, or we all die trying." The team nodded grimly. The shuttle slammed into the flagship's docking bay, cutting through the doors with fusion torches. The breach exploded inward and Jake was first through, his weapons firing before he even cleared the opening. The war legend was about to be born. The Krath flagship was a fortress. Elite guards filled every corridor. Automated defenses tracked intruders, and blast doors sealed off critical sections. Jake's strike team hit them like a lightning storm. He moved through the ship with terrifying precision. Every step was calculated. Every shot fired with purpose. The Krath guards were well-trained and heavily armed, but Jake fought like someone who had studied war itself and mastered its every principle. Lisa fought beside him, watching in amazement as he turned the enemy's advantages against them. When Krath reinforcements tried to flank them, Jake had already positioned team members in ambush. When automated turrets activated, he knew their blind spots and exploited them mercilessly. When blast doors sealed, he found alternate routes that seemed impossible until he explained the logic. "The Krath build their ships according to strict military doctrine," Jake said as he led them through a maintenance shaft. "Which means they're predictable. Every flagship follows the same basic layout. The planet killer will be mounted in the primary weapons bay, 3 decks down and forward of our current position." "How do you know this?" Lisa asked, following him through the cramped space. "Because I've studied them. I've studied every major military force in this sector of the galaxy." Jake dropped down into another corridor, his rifle already tracking for targets. "Humans are good at one thing above all else. We learn how to kill efficiently." A squad of Krath elite guards appeared ahead. Jake's team opened fire in perfect coordination, each soldier covering a specific zone. The Krath fell before they could organize a defense. They pressed deeper into the ship. The fighting grew more intense as the Krath realized where the strike team was heading. Heavy combat units deployed, towering warriors in powered armor with weapons that could punch through walls. Jake adapted. He used grenades to create choke points, collapsed ceiling panels to block pursuit, and turned the ship's own systems against the defenders. At one point, he sealed a compartment full of Krath and vented it to space, his face showing no emotion as he watched them die on the security feed. "That's cold," one of the Zenthari warriors said. "That's war," Jake replied. "We're not here to fight honorably. We're here to win." Lisa understood then. This was what humans really were beneath their diplomatic facade. They were not cruel, but they were practical. They would do whatever was necessary to achieve their objectives, unburdened by the need for honor or glory. They simply got the job done. The strike team fought through deck after deck. They took casualties. 2 humans fell to Krath fire. 3 Zenthari warriors died holding a corridor so the others could advance. Each loss seemed to fuel Jake's determination rather than break it. Back on Outpost 7 and across the Coalition fleet, tactical officers monitored the assault through Jake's active communicator, his calm voice cutting through the chaos, his tactical decisions, his absolute refusal to quit. All of it was being recorded and transmitted. "This is command to all units," General Vance broadcast. "You're witnessing something unprecedented. That human officer is doing what should be impossible. Watch and learn." The species across the Coalition fleet listened in amazement. This was not the humanity they knew. This was not the gentle, diplomatic race that preferred negotiation to violence. This was something older and more dangerous. A species that had survived countless wars on their death world and learned to excel at organized killing. Jake's team reached the weapons bay. The massive chamber housed the Planet Killer, a terrifying device that could crack a world in half. Krath technicians worked frantically to complete the firing sequence, while heavy guards formed a defensive line. "We have 12 minutes before they fire," Jake said, studying the situation. "We can't fight through that many guards in time." "Then what do we do?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "We cheat." He pulled out charges from his pack, shaped explosives designed for breaching. "We don't need to fight through them. We just need to get close enough to the weapon to plant these. The explosion will disable the firing mechanism." "That's a one-way trip," Lisa said quietly. "Whoever plants those charges won't make it back." "I know." Jake checked the charges carefully. "That's why I'm doing it alone. The rest of you create a distraction. Then withdraw back to the shuttle." "That's an order." "No." Lisa grabbed his arm. "I'm not leaving you here." Jake met her eyes. For the first time since the battle began, his expression softened. "Lisa, someone has to survive to report what happened here, and I need to know you're safe." "Why?" she demanded. "Why does it matter to you? I've been nothing but cold to you since we met." "Because you're my wife. Because I took vows that meant something to me, even if they didn't mean anything to you." Jake's voice was gentle now. "And because in the past few hours fighting beside you, I've seen who you really are. You're brave and strong and you deserve to live." Lisa felt something break inside her chest. This human, this man she had dismissed and resented, was willing to die for her. For everyone on the station. For people who had shown him nothing but condescension. "There has to be another way," she said. "There isn't. We're out of time." Jake handed her his personal data chip. "Give this to General Vance. It contains everything I know about human military tactics. Tell him to use it to train Coalition forces. Maybe it will help in the war to come." Before Lisa could argue further, alarms blared. The Planet Killer was entering final firing sequence. 8 minutes remained. Jake moved before anyone could stop him. He charged toward the weapon bay, firing as he ran, drawing every guard's attention to himself. His team had no choice but to provide covering fire. He was magnificent. He dodged and weaved through enemy fire, impossibly fast and precise. Guards fell around him. But more kept coming. He took hits, his armor scorching under Krath weapons, but he did not slow. Jake reached the Planet Killer and slapped the charges onto its firing mechanism. His fingers flew across the detonator, setting the timer. Then a Krath combat unit hit him from the side, its powered fist crushing his ribs. Jake went down hard. Blood leaking from his mouth. "Jake!" Lisa screamed. She ran toward him without thinking, firing her rifle. Other Zenthari warriors followed her lead, abandoning the plan, refusing to leave their comrade behind. The humans on the team cursed and charged too. They fought like demons, cutting through the Krath guards with pure ferocity. Lisa reached Jake and dragged him behind cover. His breathing was labored, his eyes unfocused. "The charges," he gasped. 30 seconds. "We're getting you out," Lisa said firmly. "No time. Leave me." I said no. Lisa hauled him up, supporting his weight. "You told me partners watch each other's backs." I'm watching yours. The remaining strike team members formed a defensive circle around them, fighting their way back toward the exit. The Krath tried to stop them, but nothing could break through their determination. They made it into the corridor with seconds to spare. Behind them, the charges detonated. The explosion ripped through the planet killer, chain reactions cascading through its systems. The massive weapon tore itself apart. The blast contained within the weapons bay, but devastating everything inside it. The Krath flagship shuddered. Alarms screamed across all decks. "Move," Lisa ordered, half carrying Jake toward the shuttle. They ran through smoke and chaos. The ship was dying around them, systems failing, fires spreading. They reached the docking bay where their shuttle waited. The pilot had kept the engines hot, ready for immediate departure. The strike team piled into the shuttle. Lisa strapped Jake into a crash seat, his blood staining her hands. "Get us out of here," she ordered the pilot. The shuttle launched, threading through the dying flagship's hull. Behind them, secondary explosions rippled across the Krath vessel. The planet killer was destroyed. The station was saved, but the cost had been steep. Lisa checked Jake's wounds. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe trauma. He needed medical attention immediately. "Stay with me," she said, pressing her hands against his worst injury. Jake's eyes opened slightly. "Did we get it?" "Yes. The weapon's destroyed. You did it." "Good." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Sorry about the mess." "You're not dying on me, Coleman. That's an order." A faint smile crossed his face. "Yes, ma'am." The shuttle reached Outpost 7. Medical teams rushed Jake to the infirmary. Lisa stood in the docking bay, covered in his blood, watching them carry him away. General Vance approached her. "Captain Morgan." "Your report?" "We destroyed the planet killer, sir. My husband led the assault. He's the reason we're all still alive." Vance nodded slowly. "I've been listening to the tactical recordings. What he did on that ship, the way he fought, it's being broadcast across the entire Coalition fleet. Every species is hearing it." "What do you mean?" "I mean Jake Coleman just became famous, Captain. The human who boarded an enemy flagship with 18 soldiers and destroyed a superweapon. The human who refused to surrender against impossible odds. The human who showed the galaxy what your species is really capable of." Vance looked at her seriously. 7. The Coalition is never going to look at humanity the same way again. Lisa turned to stare out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Krath fleet was withdrawing, their weapon destroyed, their invasion blunted, and somewhere in the infirmary, the man she had married out of duty was fighting for his life. She had called him weak. She had resented him, dismissed him, treated him as less than he was, and he had responded by saving her life and the lives of thousands. Lisa made a decision then. If Jake survived, she was going to truly know him. She was going to understand who he really was beneath the quiet exterior. She was going to be the partner he deserved. Because Jake Coleman was not weak. He was the strongest person she had ever met, and she was only beginning to understand what that meant. Jake woke 3 days after the battle. His eyes opened slowly, focusing on the white ceiling of the medical bay. Every part of his body hurt, a deep aching pain that told him he was still alive. Lisa sat beside his bed. She looked exhausted, her blue skin pale with fatigue. When she saw him wake, relief flooded her face. "You're awake," she said softly. "How long?" Jake's voice came out as a rasp. 3 days. The doctors had to rebuild half your chest cavity. You were dead for 2 minutes on the operating table." Lisa's hands clenched. "You almost didn't make it." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his ribs. Lisa gently pushed him back down. "Don't move. You're still healing." "The station?" Jake asked. "Safe. The Krath fleet withdrew after you destroyed their weapon. Coalition reinforcements arrived 6 hours later." Lisa paused. "You saved us all, Jake." He closed his eyes briefly. "Just doing my job?" "No. It was more than that." Lisa leaned forward. "I need to know something." "Who are you really?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. I suppose you've earned the truth. He told her everything. About Earth's colonial wars, the brutal conflicts that had nearly destroyed humanity before they finally achieved unity. About the special forces units that fought in those wars, soldiers trained to operate behind enemy lines with minimal support. About the things he had done, the missions he had led, the people he had killed. I was very good at it, Jake said quietly. Too good. By the time the wars ended, I had more blood on my hands than I could count. The coalition offered humanity membership, and our government needed people who understood both war and diplomacy. People who could operate in military and political spheres. So they sent veterans like me, as liaison officers, Lisa said, as watchdogs, and as insurance, in case the coalition ever turned hostile. Jake looked at her. We're not spies exactly. More like sleeping assets. Most humans in the coalition are exactly what they appear to be. But scattered among them are soldiers like me, veterans who know how to fight wars. Lisa absorbed this. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because the whole point was to appear harmless. Humans wanted to be seen as peaceful, diplomatic, trustworthy. If everyone knew we had combat veterans embedded in every posting, it would have created fear and suspicion. Jake coughed, wincing at the pain. I was supposed to file reports, maintain my skills quietly, and hope I never had to use them. But you did. Yes. Because the alternative was watching you die. Watching everyone on this station die. Jake met her eyes. I would do it again without hesitation. Jake. Jake met her eyes without hesitation. Jake met her eyes. Jake met her eyes. Jake met her eyes. Jake met her eyes. Even though it exposed what you really are? Even though. His expression was steady. Some things matter more than secrets, Lisa. You matter more. Lisa felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. She reached out and took his hand carefully, mindful of his injuries. I was wrong about you, she said. About humans. I judged based on assumptions and arrogance. I'm sorry. You weren't entirely wrong. Most humans are gentle, prefer peace, avoid violence when possible. Jake squeezed her hand weakly. But we can be dangerous when necessary. Our history made us very, very good at killing. We just choose not to be that way most of the time. The galaxy knows now, General Vance said. Your assault was broadcast across the Coalition fleet. Every species heard what you did. Jake closed his eyes. That's going to complicate things. Over the following weeks, they learned just how much things had changed. The recording of Jake's assault on the Krath flagship spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other humans in the Coalition were suddenly looked at with new eyes. Respect, yes, but also wariness. The Coalition Council joined an emergency session. Human representatives were questioned extensively about their military capabilities. The truth came out slowly. Earth's colonial wars had been far more brutal than anyone realized. Humanity had developed military technologies and tactics that rivaled any species in the galaxy. Why did you hide this? A Zenthari counselor demanded. The human ambassador, an older woman named Patricia Grant, answered calmly. Because we came to the Coalition seeking peace, not to intimidate. We wanted to be trusted partners, not feared weapons. Earth nearly destroyed itself in war. We learned our lesson. We chose a different path. But you kept soldiers among us, another counselor accused. We kept veterans. People who understood conflict and could serve as advisors if war ever came. Ambassador Grant looked around the chamber. And when war did come, those veterans saved lives. Jake Coleman saved Outpost 7 and everyone on it. He stopped a weapon that would have killed billions. Would you prefer he had stayed silent and let everyone die? The council could not argue with that. Jake recovered slowly. Lisa was with him every day. Learning who he really was beneath the quiet facade, he told her about growing up on Earth, about the wars that shaped him, about the nightmares he still had. She listened without judgment, starting to understand the weight he carried. Do you regret it? She asked one day. The fighting? The killing? Jake thought carefully before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret the people I couldn't save. But I don't regret fighting to protect others. That part I would do again. Even knowing the cost? Especially knowing the cost. He looked at her. Lisa, strength without purpose is just violence, but strength used to protect those who can't protect themselves, that's something worth the price. She began to see him as he truly was. Not weak, not cruel, but a warrior who had chosen peace without losing the ability to fight when needed. A man who carried terrible knowledge and skills but used them only when no other option remained. One evening, as they sat together in the observation deck watching stars drift past, Lisa spoke quietly. I want to start over. Our marriage, I mean. Jake turned to her in surprise. What? What? We began wrong. I was resentful, and you were resigned. But these past weeks, fighting beside you, watching you recover, learning who you are, I've seen the truth. Lisa took his hand. You're a good man. Jake Coleman, stronger than anyone I've ever met. And I want to truly be your wife, not just in law, but in reality. Jake's eyes showed cautious hope. Are you sure? You don't have to feel obligated just because I helped defend the station. I'm not saying this out of obligation. I'm saying it because you're someone worth knowing, worth standing beside. Lisa smiled slightly. And because I think we could be good partners, if we actually try. I'd like that, Jake said softly. I'd like that very much. They began again, this time as true equals. Lisa asked about his past and he answered honestly. He asked about her dreams, and she shared them. They talked about everything they had hidden during the months of cold formality. The nightmares came sometimes. Lisa would wake to find Jake sitting up in bed, breathing hard, lost in memories of old battles. She learned to be there for him. A quiet presence that reminded him he was safe. And Jake learned about Lisa's own struggles, the pressure from her family to be perfect, the constant need to prove herself, the fear that she was never good enough. He understood that drive better than anyone. We're both warriors, he said one night. Just fighting different battles. Not anymore, Lisa replied. Now we fight together. 6 months after the battle, new orders arrived. The coalition was forming joint military units, combining human tactical knowledge with other species' strengths. Jake and Lisa were assigned to lead one of the first mixed teams. The legend and his partner, General Vance said when he delivered the orders. The galaxy wants to see what you can do together. They accepted the assignment. Their team was small but elite, humans and Zenthari working side by side. Jake trained them in human tactics, while Lisa taught Zenthari warrior principles. The combination proved devastatingly effective. Other teams formed, copying their model. Slowly, the coalition military transformed, incorporating lessons from humanity's brutal history while maintaining the honor and courage of species like the Zenthari. The Krath Empire, seeing this new development, became more cautious. The easy targets they had expected were gone, replaced by forces that understood war on a fundamental level. Lisa and Jake stood together on the bridge of their assigned ship, preparing for their first joint mission. They wore matching command insignia now, recognized as partners in every sense. Do you ever think about what might have been? Lisa asked. If we had started differently? Sometimes, but I think we needed to go through what we did. Jake smiled at her. The easy path wouldn't have taught us what we needed to learn. And what did we learn? That strength comes in many forms. That assumptions blind us to truth. That duty can become love if you give it a chance. He took her hand, and that sometimes the person you least expect turns out to be exactly who you need. Lisa leaned against him, comfortable in a way she never imagined possible with her arranged husband. The galaxy calls you a legend now. The human who became a war hero. The galaxy is wrong. I'm not a hero. Jake looked at her seriously. I'm just a soldier who found something worth fighting for. And someone worth coming home to. Flatterer, Lisa said. But she smiled. Their ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, heading toward their next assignment. Whatever challenges waited, they would face them together, not as strangers bound by duty, but as true partners, who had earned each other's trust in fire and blood. The legend of Jake Coleman would spread farther across the galaxy. Stories would grow with each telling. But the man himself remained unchanged, quiet and steady. A warrior who chose peace whenever possible, and fought with devastating skill when necessary. And beside him stood Lisa Morgan, the Zenthari officer who had married him for duty and stayed with him for love. Together, they would show the galaxy what humanity and its allies could accomplish. Not through conquest or domination, but through partnership and mutual respect. The stars awaited them, full of challenges and dangers, but also full of hope. They jumped to hyperspace, leaving Outpost 7 behind but carrying its lessons forward. The station that had witnessed a human become a legend now stood as a symbol of what the coalition could be when different species truly understood each other. In the medical bay where Jake had recovered, a small plaque was mounted on the wall. It read simply, "Here fought Jake Coleman, human officer, who taught us that strength and gentleness are not opposites but partners, just as war and peace must be." And in the observation deck where Lisa and Jake had their first real conversation, couples from a dozen species came to talk and dream and plan their futures together. Because sometimes the best legends are not about gods or monsters, but about ordinary people who become extraordinary through their choices. Jake Coleman chose to fight when fighting was needed. He chose to be gentle when gentleness was possible. He chose to love someone who had every reason to reject him. And in doing so, he became something more than a soldier or a legend. He became a bridge between species, a symbol of what the galaxy could be. The story of the man who married for duty and became a legend would be told for generations. But the best part of the story, the part that mattered most to those who lived it, was simpler. It was the story of two people who found each other in the darkness of war and chose to build something better together. That was the real legend, and it was only just beginning.